Hello students, today we are going to study the first chapter of Footprints Without Feet, and the name of the chapter is A Triumph of Surgery, written by James Herriot. The actual name of the writer is James Alfred Witt. He is known by the pen name as James Herriot. He was born in Sunderland, United Kingdoms, and he is a veterinary surgeon. A Triumph of Surgery, his story is a simple story with a simple subject which has much significance for all of our lives. This chapter tells us how a rich lady pampers her dog and makes it very lazy. Her overfeeding the dog makes it fat and ill. The narrator, who is a doctor, understands the dog's lethargy and treats it as his clinic. At his clinic, the dog becomes active and the lady takes him back home. Parents often pamper their kids by giving them excessive of variety of meals. Because of this, they become overweight and spoiled. Parents just try to meet every demand of the kid and fail to give them exercise for the body and mind. The same we will see in the story. The Tricky, a small dog, is pampered and overfed by his rich mistress. Right? She loves her dog very much and is unable to refuse him anything he wants. Tricky is fond of eating cream cakes and chocolates. One day when Mrs. Pamphry is out with Tricky for a walk, the narrator sees them and stops down Mrs. Pamphry to talk. While talking to Mrs. Pamphry, he realizes that she has been overfeeding Tricky and also had been giving him things that he shouldn't eat, due to which Tricky had started looking like a bloated sausage. Soon Tricky got unwell. Mrs. Pamphry has to call Mr. Herriot for a help. She does not want to send him away, but the only way suggested by Mr. Herriot is to get him to the hospital for 15 days. There the story unfolds into how he gets well. Now let us go through the story of Tricky, A Triumph of Surgery. So first of all, I will read the paragraph in front of you and then I will explain you the paragraph. Okay? So where the first paragraph says, the story starts when Mrs. Pamphry, a rich lady, takes her dog out for a walk. Right? Then see, there Mr. Herriot, the doctor, meets her. So the story starts there. See what, as a narrator, the doctor has written. I was really worried about Tricky this time. He is looking at Tricky. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. Obviously, too fat like a sausage. He had become hugely fat like a bloated sausage with a leg each corner. His eyes bloodshot and rheumy. Obviously, the eyes have become red, bloodshot, inflamed. There is some difficulty in walking, so that's also shown in his eyes. It's rheumy. Rheumy means watery, the full of water all the time, as if there is a small problem in the body. Started straight ahead and his tongue lolled from his jaws. He was panting very badly. Mrs. Pamphry hastened to explain. He was so listless, Mr. Herriot. He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. This is what Mrs. Pamphry is saying. So I have been giving him some little extra meals to build up him. Some malt, some cod liver oil, and a bowl of Horlicks that night to make him sleep. That was according to Mrs. Pamphorey. She thought that Tricky has become malnourished. He's getting thick. See, he is getting thin. So she again added some more to the dog's food. Apart from the 3 meals he was given, nothing much really. She is saying nothing much. And did you cut down the sweet things as I told you? The doctor asked. Oh, I did for a bit. But he seemed to be so weak. I had to relent. She stopped. See what she's saying. Oh, I stopped. I never gave him these things, but after a while I had to give back. He does love cream cakes and chocolates, so I can't bear to refuse him. This is a motherly nature, no? All the mothers do this for the children. I looked down again at the little dog. The doctor is saying, that was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pamphorey hadn't mentioned. These were the things that were listed by Mrs. Pamphorey, and the things that were not listed by Mrs. Pamphorey that she kept on giving him again and again. The doctor asked Mrs. Pamphorey, are you giving him plenty of exercise? Well, Mrs. Pamphorey, see, mother, he has a little walks with me as you can see. But Hodgkin, the gardener has been down with lumbago. Lumbago, it's a pain in the back. So she is telling about that he is suffering from lumbago. So there has been no ring throwing lately. So he was not having the ring throwing exercise, running behind ring and bringing it back. So here we see that how Mrs. Pamphorey is having excuses for his exercise, and there also the malnutrition is able that she is telling us that how she has given more and more food. Now the writer again comes in the paragraph. He says, another paragraph, I tried to sound severe. Now this is very strict. He said strictly, now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet, Mrs. Pamphorey. Now over here, Mrs. Pamphorey wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Herriot. I am sure you are right. But it is so difficult. So very difficult. She set off, her head down along the road. Why? She is mother, isn't it? And that's why it's very hard for her to await things from the child. And she is bringing up the dog as if it's her own child. So she sets off as if determined to put a new regime into practice immediately. Whatever was told to her, she's going to practice. It was looking like that. I watched the progress with growing concern. When they were going, doctor was watching them. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. He was wearing a coat on. There was a whole wardrobe of these coats. She was loving. She loved Tricky very much, and Tricky was having a lot of things at home. All the type of dresses he can wear for cold weather, a different sort of outfit, the raincoat for the wet days and everything. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. Harness is that all catch that is tied along the chest and is caught by somebody. So that is harnessed. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pamphorey. Now doctor is believing in one thing, that very soon he will be getting a phone call from Mrs. Pamphorey that Tricky is very, very ill. And the expected call came within a few days. Within a few days. Obviously, the doctor was right. Tricky will fall ill, and he has. Mrs. Pamphry was distraught. She was very worried. She was very upset, distraught. Tricky would not eat nothing because Tricky was eating nothing. And refused even his favorite dishes. And besides, he had bouts of vomiting. He was vomiting. Excessive of food will increase the liver. And excessive of liver will not be, the man or animal will not be able to eat. He will always feel as if a nausea, sort of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting, because he was very uneasy at the stomach. Everything was stored inside. Didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance only. The doctor is telling he had already made the plans. As soon as he saw the Tricky in a few days back in the street, he had made the plan over there only. The only way to get out now. So what he is telling her, the only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. So what he suggested, I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight. Fortnight means 15 days. To be kept under observation. The poor lady almost swooned. She was near about to collapse. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. She complained that if he will not see, then the dog will die. But I took a firm line. But the doctor was very firm. He wanted Tricky to be at the hospital. Tricky was very ill and this was the only way to save him. The doctor knew. In fact, I thought it is best to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pamphry's wailing. I thought that let her cry, isn't it? But he took Mrs. Pamphry's Tricky to his surgery. I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in the blanket. And he marched out with the dog wrapped in a blanket. So we see that he was adamant to take Tricky to his surgery. Now, as soon as he was getting out of the house, the next paragraph, see, the entire staff was roused and maids rushed in and out, bringing his daybed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys and rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl, and everything what Tricky might need in his house. Now, realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive. Now, obviously, he would have waited there. They would have kept on coming with the things. As I moved off, Mrs. Pamphry, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of the little coach through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. Everybody in the house. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. I patted the head of Tricky and made a brave effort to wag his tail. Poor old lad. Boy, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think I know your cure for. You haven't a kick in you. That means I know that you want to, but you do not have that action in you right now. You are suffering. You are motionless. Right? So here we see that how he was full of pathos. Tricky. Right? Then he is telling us at the surgery, the household dogs, there were so many other dogs at the dog, obviously it is a surgery, it's a hospital for the dogs, and there are many other dogs. At the surgery, the household dogs surged around me. They came and thus they started rushing towards the writer. Tricky looked down at a noisy pack. The dogs with dull eyes, and when put down, lay motionless on the carpet. And he was lying motionless. The other dogs, after sniffing around him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. So other dogs, when he was laid down, the other dogs came, sniffed him, but he was left alone. Why? Because he was uninteresting. Nobody wanted to come next to him because he was not moving, motionless creature. So the writer, again, see next paragraph, writer says, I made up a bed for him in a warm, loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. For 2 days I kept an eye on him, giving him no food, but plenty of water. He was not given any food. Why? Already he was fed so much. Now what is lacking is liquid diet. So first he only gave him water. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings. Now he started to move. And on the third day, he began to whimper, at least to make some sounds. Right? When he heard the dogs in the yard. So he started making some sounds. Now see, I opened the door. The writer opened the door for Tricky. Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by Joe. Joe is another dog, a greyhound, and his friends. So when he went out, Joe and the other dogs, they just encircled him, trying to make a friendship with this fellow. Right? After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moved off down the ground. Obviously, they just saw that, let's see, he is the same dog. He is not, he is actionless, motionless, and he is uninteresting. So they went down. Tricky followed them. Now this is the change. This is the time that is changing. Rolling slightly with his surplus fat. He was rolling slightly. All this fat, they were running. He was only just moving. Later that day, I was present at feeding time. At feeding time, he was present at the place where the dogs used to feed. I watched while Tristan, the man who used to give food to the dogs, slopped the food into the bowls. He was just pushing the food from the big bowl or big carriage to the bowls. There was the usual headlong rush followed by the sounds of high-speed eating. All the dogs rushed towards their bowls and making a clap, clap, clap sound, that eating sound, that fast eating sound, pushing here and there. Every dog knew that if he fell behind the others, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of his meal. Obviously, if he left behind, the other dogs will come and start eating his meal. So every dog knew this, and so they are ready to finish the meal as soon as possible.